Good evening. On Tuesday the 28th of October, 565 AD, an Irish monk known as St. Columba was returning from his grocery store when he took a shortcut along the River Ness in Scotland and happened upon some local residents burying a man beside the river. When he asked what on earth was going on and why hadn't anyone called an ambulance or the police, it was explained that these things hadn't been invented yet, and that even if they had, it would take an extremely loud voice, as neither had the telephone. St. Columba accepted that this was indeed the case, and that there probably wouldn't be an investigation or trial or any of that shit, but inquired as to how the man had been killed anyway. Columba was told that the man had been mauled to death by some sort of terrifying aquatic monster. Although Columba had earned both his red and violet swimming badges, he didn't fancy being mauled, and so he sent one of his followers across the river to investigate. The follower claimed that he was approached by the beast in a rather shifty manner, at which point he stuck 2 fingers up and shouted, "Oi, don't come any closer or I'll cut you so I will," at which point the beast fled. Columba and his followers were convinced that they had seen a miracle, but what they didn't know is that they had set in motion a long series of future events, where fishermen, dog walkers, ramblers, and people with the idea of finding some kind of monster specifically in mind would claim to have seen what became known as the Loch Ness Monster, or Nessie for short. Well, let's hope that it's female, or it is going to be pissed. Anyway, what proof do they have that there really is a monster swimming around in Loch Ness? Is there anything in it? Is there any hard evidence? I took an overnight sleeper train to Scotland, which is in a different country to where I'm from, and decided to take a look for myself. I bought a rubber dinghy, and later on got into an argument with the shop clerk when I tried to return it on the grounds that the monster might have sharp teeth. Following an exhaustive 3-hour rant about consumer rights that involved me climbing into a dustbin in the fucking kids' playground where I'd eaten my cheese and pickle sandwiches, I eventually retrieved the soggy receipt that the shop clerk reluctantly accepted. I then hired a wooden boat and set out on my adventure. 1 hour later, I found myself rapidly returning to shore, wrapped in a warm blanket aboard a lifeboat, having learned nothing other than how bad I am at steering boats. But it was during this return journey that I got chatting to one of my rescuers, and he suggested that I use a drone, as it's 2023, and there really is no need to get wet or endanger my own life, which I thought was a rather good idea, although I did pretend that I'd already thought of it myself. This may take some time, given that there are often several years between sightings, something itself that makes me incredulous that there really is a monster out here somewhere. So I've hired David Attenborough to narrate a brief history of the Loch Ness Monster, whilst I learn how to pilot this fucking contraption. Over to you, David.
Thank you, Frank. When I, famous nature bloke David Attenborough, was asked to narrate a piece on the Loch Ness Monster, my first thought was, are you taking the piss? And yet today I find myself standing in the mist on the banks of what can only be described as one of Scotland's most famous lochs. I am here because a funny-looking little man with ridiculous eyebrows and a massive head, who looks like a cross between a potato on toothpicks and Oscar the Grouch, a man who I have never heard of.
Stick to the brief, Attenborough.
Of course, a man that has hired me to talk to you about the history of an aquatic serpent called the Loch Ness Monster, or Nessie for short. Sounds like a girl's name. Let's hope that...
I've done that bit.
Right. Well, the Loch Ness Monster can best be described as an elusive Cretaceous amphibian serpent dragon monster fish that swims about in the minds of people who like to believe in serpent dragon monster fish. And yet here I am, having been dragged away from my vast collection of plastic toy dinosaurs to stand around in the cold mud on the banks of a loch in Scotland simply because I needed the money. And this is where this stupid twat serpent is supposed to be. The earliest reported sighting of a monster in this area was in 565 AD, which tells me a lot, as the only species I can think of that can live that long is an imaginary one. Nonetheless, the sheer fascination we have with the mysteries of the universe, coupled with the sheer fascination that we have with making other people gasp, has inevitably led to more and more sightings. And the invention of cameras and sonar equipment has invariably led to many grainy, shaky, blurry images that amount to nothing more than evidence of lumps of stuff that on any normal day one might expect to find in a large, naturally formed body of water. Perhaps the most famous of these became known as the surgeon's photograph. Allegedly taken by Robert Wilson in 1934, it sparked a huge surge in both interest and sightings, even though it turned out that it was really just a photograph of a toy submarine bought from Woolworths with some wood stuck to it with putty. It was really taken by Marmaduke Wetherell as a hoax. Wilson, a gynecologist from London, agreed to take part in the hoax because, well, when you spend all day looking at them, I suppose you eventually become fucking hell hard on.
It would appear that David Attenborough has had to leave early. But it doesn't matter, as I couldn't find the Loch Ness Monster anyway, and most of the locals seemed more interested in my drone. I'm not sure that they've even seen one before. Anyway, I'll call this case closed and get back to London. Good day to you all.